Faster and faster went the mail coach. The passengers started to hoot and howl with excitement and fear. Through village after village, Mr. Butt drove at top speed. Haroun observed that in each village, a man carrying a large mailbag would be waiting by the bus stop in the village square, and that this man would look at first confused and then furious as the mail coach roared by him without even slowing down. Haroun could also see that at the rear of the mail coach there was a special area, separated from the passengers by a wire mesh partition, that was piled high with mailbags, just like those held by the angry, fist-shaking men in the village squares. Mr. Butt had apparently forgotten to deliver or collect the mail. "Don't we need to stop for the letters?" Haroun finally leant forward to inquire. At the same moment, Rashid the storyteller cried out, "Do we need to go so blinking fast?" Mr. Butt managed to make the mail coach go even faster. "Need to stop?" he bellowed over his shoulder. "Need to go so quickly? Well, my sirs, I will tell you this. Needs a slippery snake. That's what it is. The boy here says that you, sir, need a view before sunset. And maybe it's so, and maybe no. And some might say that the boy here needs a mother. And maybe it's so, and maybe no. But it's been said of me that Butt needs speed. But, it may be that my heart truly needs a different sort of thrill. Oh, needs a funny fish. It makes people untruthful. They all suffer from it, but they will not always admit. Hurrah!" he added, pointing. "The snow line, icy patches ahead, crumbling road surface, hairpin bends, danger of avalanches, full speed ahead." He had simply decided not to stop for the mail in order to keep his promise to Haroun. "No problem," he shouted gaily. "Everybody gets other people's correspondence anyhow in this country of so many too many places and so few too few names." The mail coach rushed up into the mountains of M, swinging around terrifying curves with a great squealing of tires. The luggage, which was all tied down on the roof rack, began to shift about in a worrying way. The passengers, who all looked alike, now that their perspiration had finished turning the dust that covered them into mud, began to complain. "My hold all!" yelled a mud woman. "Crazy buffalo, Looney Tune! Desist from your speeding, or my possessions will be thrown to kingdom come." "It is we ourselves who will be thrown, madame," a mudman answered sharply. "So less noise about your personal items, please." He was interrupted angrily by a second mudman. "Have a care! It is my good wife you are insulting." Then a second mudwoman joined in. "So what? For so long she has been shouting in my husband's good ear. So why not should he lodge complaint? See her, the dirty skinny bones. Is she a woman or a muddy stick? See here, this bend, what a tight one," Mr. Butt sang out. "Here, 2 weeks ago, occurred a major disaster. Bus plunged into gully, all persons killed, 20, 60, 70 lives minimum. God, too sad. If you desire, I can stop for taking of photographs." "Yes, stop, the passengers begged, anything to make him slow down. But Mr. Butt went even faster instead. "Too late," he yodeled gaily. "Already it is far behind. Requests must be made more promptly if I am to comply." "I did it again," Haroun was thinking. "If we crash now, if we're smashed to bits or fried like potato chips in a burning wreck, it will be my fault this time, too." Now they were high in the mountains of M, and Haroun felt sure that the mail coach was speeding up as they got higher. They were so high that there were clouds in the gorges below them, and the mountainsides were covered in thick, dirty snow, and the passengers were shivering with cold. The only sound to be heard in the mail coach was the chattering of teeth. Everyone had fallen into a scared and frozen silence, while Mr. Butt was concentrating so hard on his high-speed driving that he had even stopped yelling "Yahoo!" and pointing out the sites of particularly gruesome accidents. Haroun had the feeling that they were floating on a sea of silence, that a wave of silence was lifting them up toward the mountain tops. His mouth was dry and his tongue felt stiff and caked. Rashid couldn't make a sound either, not even work? Any moment now, Haroun was thinking, and he knew that something very similar must be in the mind of each passenger. I am going to be wiped out, like a word on a blackboard. One swoosh of the duster and I'll be gone for good. Then he saw the cloud. The mail coach was streaking along the side of a narrow ravine. Up ahead, the road swung so sharply to the right that it seemed they must plunge over the edge. Roadside notices warned of the extra danger in words so severe that they no longer rhymed. Drive like hell and you will get there, was one. And also, be dead slow or be dead. Just then a thick cloud shot through with impossible shifting colors. A cloud from a dream or a nightmare hopped up from the gorge below them and plopped itself down on the road. They hit it just as they went round the bend, and in the sudden darkness, Haroun heard Butt slamming on the brakes as hard as he could. Noise returned. Screams, the skidding of tires. This is it, Haroun thought. And then they were out of the cloud, in a place with smooth walls curving up around them, the rows of yellow lights set in the ceiling above. Tunnel, Mr. Butt announced. At the far end, Valley of K. Hours to sunset, 1. Time in tunnel, some minutes only. 1 view coming up. Like I said, no problem. They came out of the tunnel of eye, and Mr. Butt stopped the mail coach so that everyone could enjoy the sight of the sun setting over the Valley of K, with its fields of gold, which really grew saffron, and its silver mountains, which were really covered in glistening pure white snow, and its dull lake, which didn't look dull at all. Rashid Khalifa hugged Haroun and said, "Thanks for fixing this up, son. But I admit that for some time I thought we were all fixed up and proper. Fixed good and proper. I mean, done for, finito. Khatam Shud." Khatam Shud, Haroun frowned. What was that story you used to tell? Rashid spoke as if he were remembering an old dream. Khatam Shud, he said slowly, is the arch-enemy of all stories, even of language itself. He is the prince of silence and the foe of speech. And because everything ends, because dreams end, stories end, life ends, at the finish of everything, we use his name. It's finished, we tell one another. It's over. Khatam Shud, the end. This place is really doing you good, Haroun noted. No more arc. Your crazy stories are starting to come back. On the way down into the valley, Mr. Butt drove slowly and with extreme caution. But, there is no need for speed now that my service has been performed, he explained to the quivering mud men and mud women, who all glared furiously at Haroun and Rashid. As the light failed, they passed a sign that had originally read, "Welcome to K," but somebody had daubed it with crude, irregular letters, so that it now said, "Welcome to Kashmar." What's Kashmar, Haroun wanted to know. It's the work of some miscreant, shrugged Mr. Butt. Not every person in the valley is happy, as you may find. It's a word from the ancient tongue of Franj, which is no longer spoken in these parts, Rashid explained. In those long-gone days, the valley, which is now simply K, had other names. One, if I remember correctly, was Kashmir. Another was this Kashmar. Do those names mean anything? Haroun asked. All names mean something, Rashid replied. Let me think. Yes, that was it. Kashmir can be translated as the place that hides a sea. But Kashmar is a ruder name. Come on, urged Haroun. You can't stop there. In the old tongue, Rashid admitted, it was the word for nightmare. It was dark when the mail coach arrived at the bus depot in K. Haroun thanked Mr. Butt and said goodbye. But, I will be here to escort you home, he replied. Best seats will be kept, no question. Come when you're ready. I will be steady, then we'll go. Varoom, no problem. Haroun had been afraid that more shouting men would be waiting for Rashid there, but K was a remote place, and news of the storyteller's disastrous performance in the town of G had not traveled as fast as Mr. Butt's mail coach. So they were greeted by the boss himself, the top man in the ruling party of the valley, the candidate in the forthcoming elections, on whose behalf Rashid had agreed to appear. This boss was a fellow so shiny-faced and smooth, dressed in white bush shirt and trousers so starchy clean and neat, that the scruffy little mustache straggling over his upper lip seemed to have been borrowed from someone else. It was far too tawdry for a gent as slick as this. The slick gent greeted Rashid with a movie star smile, whose insincerity made Haroun feel ill. "Esteemed Mr. Rashid," he said, "an honor for us. A legend comes to town." If Rashid were to flop in the valley of K the way he had in the town of G, Haroun thought, this gent would soon change his tune. But Rashid looked pleased by the flattery, and anything that cheered him up was worth putting up with for the present. "The name," the slick gent said, inclining his head slightly and clicking his heels together, "is Batu." "Almost the same as the mail coach driver," Haroun exclaimed, and the slick gent with the ratty mustache threw up his hands in horror. "Not at all the same as any bus driver," he shrieked, suffering Moses. "Do you know to whom you speak? Do I look like the bus driver type?" "Well, excuse me," Haroun began, but Mr. Batu was marching away, nose in the air. "Respected Mr. Rashid, to the lakeside," he commanded over his shoulder. "Bearers will bring your bags." During the 5-minute walk to the shore of the dull lake, Haroun began to feel distinctly uneasy. Mr. Batu and his party, which now included Rashid and Haroun, were permanently surrounded by exactly 101 heavily armed soldiers. And such extraordinary people as Haroun noticed on the street wore extremely hostile expressions. "There's a bad feeling in this town," he told himself. "If you live in a sad city, you know unhappiness when you run into it. You can smell it on the night air, when the fumes of cars and trucks have faded away and the moon makes everything look cleaner." Rashid had come to the valley because he remembered it as the most joyful of places. But it was plain that trouble had found its way up here now. How popular can this Batu be if he needs all these soldiers to protect him? Haroun wondered. He tried to whisper to Rashid that perhaps the slick gent with the face fuzz wasn't the right fellow to support in the election campaign, but there were always too many soldiers within earshot. And then they reached the lake. Waiting for them was a boat in the shape of a swan. "Nothing but the best for distinguished Mr. Rashid," crooned snooty Mr. Batu. "Tonight you stay in the finest houseboat on the lake, as my guest. I trust it will not prove too humble for a grandee as exalted as you." He sounded polite, but he was really being insulting, Haroun understood. Why did Rashid put up with it? Haroun climbed into the swan boat, feeling irritated. Oarsmen in army uniform began to row. Haroun looked down into the water of the dull lake. It seemed to be full of strange currents, crisscrossing in intricate patterns. Then the swan boat passed what looked like a carpet floating on the water's surface. "Floating garden," Rashid told Haroun. "You weave lotus roots together to make the carpet, and then you can grow vegetables right here on the lake." His voice had a melancholy ring again, so Haroun murmured, "Don't be sad." "Sad? Unhappy?" yelped Snooty Batu. "Surely eminent Mr. Rashid is not dissatisfied with the arrangements." Rashid the storyteller had always been incapable of inventing stories about himself, so he answered truthfully, "Sir, not so. This is an affair of the heart." "Why did you tell him that?" Haroun thought fiercely. But Snooty Batu was delighted by the revelation. "Not to worry, unique Mr. Rashid," he cried tactlessly. "She may have left you, but there are plenty more fish in the sea." Fish? Haroun thought in a rage. Did he say fish? Was his mother a pomfret? Must she now be compared to a glumfish or a shark? Really, Rashid should bop this Batu right on his stuck-up nose. The storyteller trailed a hand listlessly in the waters of the dull lake. Ah, but you must go a long, long way to find an angelfish, he sighed. As if in response to his words, the weather changed. A hot wind began to blow, and a mist rushed at them across the water. The next thing they knew, they could see nothing at all. Never mind that angelfish, Haroun thought. I can't even, just at the moment, find the tip of my nose.